time, just like Socrates' horse. I have a very special guest on who has to remain kind of anonymous, but he gives me a lot of information about what's going on in the Philippines and some of the details there that are helpful for us as we try to figure out what's going on in the United States. Now, before we get to some of those issues, the first thing that I would want to go over is just a summary of some of the details that have come up just in the last couple days regarding this struggle over the presidential election. So, Eric, I mean, this is a good way to start. Is just asking you, what do you have any questions that I can help you with to try to navigate the current situation with the fight over the election?
Well, I believe it's rigged. I believe it's rigged, and I believe California has been rigged for a very long time, and and I'm not watching the news anymore because I can't find any credible news that will really tell us what's really happening. But right now, when I turn on the TV this morning, OAN, One American News, they're especially with, we don't watch anymore here.
Right.
Their ratings are down.
Right.
I believe their ratings will, because they're also fake news. And I believe the Smartmatic that they use to count the ballots, to verify the ballots, is a fraud. It happened in the Philippines long before, and I know it was brought by us, the U.S., and they have used that, and they perfected the fraudulent system in the Philippines.
Okay, I want to jump in on that, because one of the major developments was last night. Sidney Powell filed these two really important legal briefs. These two lawsuits, one in Michigan, one in Georgia. They were pretty shocking. I read through the briefs. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them, but it's pretty wide-ranging allegations, and she points to all of the evidence that she's going to be able to bring before the court. I think if you're liberal and you're not nervous at this point, you're not paying attention, because I think that things are going to go in her favor, I think, pretty quickly. But one thing that was not mentioned in the briefs, and I had been trying to get this information to the legal team, was the Philippines, because I think that's a major historical precedent for it. I think they've had a little bit more focus on Venezuela, obviously, and on China and Iran. But Smartmatic has a very long and ugly history in the Philippines. And my special guest here, Mr. E, he put me in contact with some people who had followed this and tracked this. And one figure that I was able to find through the process of following up on those leads was a congressman named Gary Chong. Can you explain who Gary Chong was exactly?
Oh,
it looks like it froze up again. I think his signal is freezing up. Gary Chong was basically a congressman in the Philippines who was. Oh, are you there?
Yes, Bobby.
Okay.
I think Gary Chong had exposed how the cheating is done using Smartmatic. He was he knows everything. I think this guy had been to which country was that? Where the Smartmatic has been? Where? No, not China. No, not China. That software was built. Yes, he was there, and he studied that, and he knew how to manipulate the system, how to devalidate the votes from the other side. So it was he went there and he studied that. But long
Okay.
time ago, let me tell you that Smartmatic was used during the Gloria Macapagal election against Fernando Poe Jr., who was a famous actor and um,
He had a lot of popular support. Poe did.
candidacy during that time. Oh my God! Yes,
Mhm.
just like Trump. I mean, the people loved him. They were, when he's campaigning, they all say the same thing: "We love you," but in Filipino. And
Mhm.
knew that this guy is going to win, Fernando Poe. So during the election, he was leading a lot. He was leading a lot during the thing. So in a matter of hours, like around 5 p.m. in the Philippines, during that time, the whole electricity came off from most of the big provinces where there's
And this is
where
and this
there
is
are a lot.
and this is not a common occurrence in the Philippines, right? I know that there's brownouts, there's blackouts, but I mean, for that big of
Yeah,
an electrical outage, this was kind of a big
correct.
incident, right?
Yes, correct.
Mhm.
And after that, everybody was like, "What the hell happened?" They were expecting the electricity to come back on. What about the counting? What's going to happen?
Mhm.
Are they going to stop the counting, or there's no lights or whatever? Um, so after 6 hours, the lights turned on, and Arroyo was ahead, just like what happened
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
Michigan, what happened to Georgia. She was ahead. She was like almost 500,000 votes ahead. So,
Mhm.
and after that, a day after, they declared as the winner,
Mhm.
the president. And this guy couldn't believe
Right.
it. A lot of people couldn't believe it, and they
And
almost called
what year was this?
martial law.
Yeah.
I
What
can't.
year?
What year was that? I know what year. We were there. Huh? 2004? Yeah,
Yeah.
something around there.
And
That year.
I
Yeah.
think that was right when these machines, this technology first started to circulate, right? This was like
Yes.
right in the beginning stages of it. I think the Philippines was kind of a pilot market where
Yes.
they first
Yes.
used this machine. And
And
right.
Bobby, do you know that um, Macapagal Arroyo is Bill Clinton's classmate in Harvard, and
Mhm.
Bill Clinton endorsed Macapagal Arroyo to run as president in the Philippines. You don't, you guys, if you go back to history, they're very close. During that time. Anyways, um, the Fernando Poe Jr. couldn't take what happened. The election was really rigged. He died of a heart attack, and it was so sad. And he was mourned by millions of people, and nothing happened after that. Nothing happened. So they, the uh, the other side, um, requested an investigation. So they did investigate her, and the investigation lasted for 4 years. Imagine that, almost 4 years. But she was already reigning as a president.
So did
So,
they ultimately, from what I could tell from when I tried to do the document trail on this, they did find that there were problems with that election, right? Because the executives of
uh-huh,
Smartmatic were called before the legislature of the Philippines, and
correct.
legislators
Hmm.
were screaming at the Smartmatic people. This was 2010 or so.
Yep.
I mean, this was like 6 years after the election. They were still screaming
Hmm.
about it, right?
Yeah. Yep. And
Right.
they, Arroyo. They found that Arroyo had colluded with the head of the election people who does all the counting and all that stuff. in the
Right.
Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
She was caught on recording telling the head to reverse the outcome of the election, the numbers on her favor.
Mm-hmm.
There was there was a recording that says hello Garci, because the name of the guy is Garcia, the last name.
Mm-hmm.
It was recorded. It was some dumb, I don't know how did that happen, but what a dumb move. It was recorded, and I think she was tried in court, and she was jailed. She was jailed.
Mm-hmm.
She admitted that she cheated during the election because it's already out in the open.
I mean, I think
The evidence is so.
yeah, the evidence. Well, it was the thing about it is like, let's just try to step back for a moment and try to get our heads around this. This was Smartmatic. It was their machines. And we've already seen the links between Smartmatics and Sequoia and Dominion, these various tabulation companies. The fact that this all happened in the Philippines, and I would bet you that 99% of the people in the United States have no idea that this happened. When during in the lead up to this election, when the liberals were telling us all that there was no such thing as election fraud, one of the things that I noticed was that they showed complete ignorance about the international context and just how common election fraud is around the world. In the case of the Philippines, this was the same machines. It was the same political cliques. It was the Clinton social links, etc. People who were kind of tied to them through common social bonds. And this looks to me so similar to what happened. It was the same thing where there's a power outage. That was what I also heard from people in Latin America and in Africa. The same thing where all of a sudden, as the votes are being announced, the power goes out. And in the case of the United States, they couldn't do that. I mean, that was just going to be too big. Although they tried basically in Georgia. Didn't they claim that there was a broken water pipe? And then it turns out that there was no broken water pipe. But what their goal is to stop the counting. Now, from what you saw of Sidney Powell's testimony, does this ring true to you that ultimately what happens is they have to freeze the counting because somebody has to reset the machines, right? Isn't that basically how it happens?
Yes. You know, what's his name? The guy that you mentioned, Chong.
Yes.
They have some kind of USBs, USB, whatever that thing is. They stick. It's like they put it on the machine, and the machine downloads them, right?
Right.
And that's what the guy was telling the court. You know, he was telling everyone that this is how you cheat. This is how you do it, and this is how you can cheat using this Smartmatic. You know, Brazil don't use that anymore. The Brazil, if you look at if you Google it, Brazil election, they don't want to use Smartmatic anymore. They're not using that anymore. I think they're back in the old way.
From what I mean, there's some people from Brazil that I have been able to be in contact with through Twitter, and they told me the exact same story. This happens in regional elections and national elections. This is a very common occurrence. And America kind of walked into this trap. And it's really sad that this international context, I wish that the Philippine experience had been included in those briefs that went to Georgia and Michigan. I mean, it's not too late. Maybe if we can get this information to Powell's legal team, I think it's important because what happened in the Philippines, in my mind, is the closest approximation to what happened in the United States. And it also gives us the trail of these American politicians who were very cozy with the people who were caught cheating. Now, the problem with the Gary Chong testimony is that he was on many different news shows in the Philippines, but I don't speak Tagalog. And he goes back and forth between Tagalog and English. I don't know if you had a chance to see any of those videos and if you could summarize them a little bit, but I was not able to follow.
Yeah, I will. I can when I summarize, or I can call someone in the Philippines who is really up to this and who was involved with the investigating the cheating and all that stuff. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. I don't know how much money they're getting to cheat. But Smartmatic, I mean, I'm telling you, this is whatever that machine and what they were using right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to rig the Smartmatic. It's you can get the evidence if you look at the
Well, yeah, I mean,
from
you can
the
find,
Philippines.
yeah, you can find it even on YouTube. When I went through and I
Yeah.
followed some of the YouTube links that our contact gave us from that area, I found that there were areas of there were videos where they had very long hearings about the election
Mhm.
fraud in the Philippines. And the scariest thing is that one of the people who was thoroughly being interrogated there was Hader Garcia. And he was
Mhm.
brought before the Philippine legislature. And right now, he is the election director for Tarrant County, Texas, which had very strange election results this season because Trump
Wow.
won on election night. And then a couple days later, they said they found all of these votes. And then all of a sudden, Biden led. And Tarrant County is, I mean, when you drive around Tarrant County,
True.
you're going to see Trump flags that are going to blind you everywhere. Now, what are you hearing from people in California? You said that California you felt was rigged. Is there a growing sense among people in California that these election tactics have been used there?
Where we're letting them do it, that's the problem. You can tell that if we were watching the news and Fox had already called the election for California to Biden. I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, this big of a city, of a state, and look at Pennsylvania, Michigan, they're still counting, and California has already finished counting, and it already called it for Biden. It's unbelievable. Even we were in San Diego, they call it for Biden already. I mean, um, it's just we know that it's been going on. I mean, we just we just couldn't show it. But we know what's going on. We know it's rigged. When I cast my ballot, remember I texted you. I casted my ballot, and I went on the site to see if my ballot has been received. It was not received. It was not received.
Right.
November 3rd. I went back November 4th, and it says received November 3rd. How did that happen? How
Hmm.
did that happen? You're supposed to count everything on November 3rd. How
Right.
did that happen? November 3rd at night. Remember, I told you I went on the site and and I
Right.
even went to the San Diego election office and I said, you know, what happened to my ballot? You know, I even called them and I said, sir, it's not in yet. Okay, it's already midnight, it's already done. November 4th, 5 p.m., it just said November 3rd. My ballot was received at 9 a.m. November 3rd. Was counted and received and counted.
Mm-hmm.
How could I checked the site
Well, I think
twice.
what it shows is, and this is I've noticed this in California for a long time because for instance, in Ventura County there was a race between Julia Brownley and a Republican, and that was another one where the Republican was leading the day of the election, and then all of these 52,000 provisional and mail-in ballots came in
Yep.
supposedly to this one district. Now it's not a, I mean, it's out of 170,000 people voting, 52,000 of them are provisional or mail-ins. This was way before COVID. I mean, this was completely unlikely. But I think what
Yeah.
they do is they hold back all the provisional ballots and all the mail-in ballots, and they don't put those into the mix until they know what numbers they need.
Of
Do you know? And
course.
right. And do you remember the race between Loretta Sanchez and Kamala Harris?
Yes, I know that.
That
I
one was
told you
very
about.
that one was very suspicious to me because Kamala
Mhm.
Harris, she's African American in a state that is 6% African American. She was running against another Democrat, Loretta Sanchez, who was Latina in a state that is like 41% Latino. And she was Loretta Sanchez was very well known. And then Kamala Harris, the returns come back that she beat her by like 2.5 million votes. I don't believe it. I don't think it happened. I think that was fake. The whole thing was fake.
That should be investigated. I don't know what happened to that. Well, it's Democrat to Democrat, but it's frustrating. Now I heard that in Pennsylvania, they're tossing out the all the mail-in ballots. I don't know if that's true. They're tossing it out.
They're trying to get them to do that, and you know the liberals are going to fight that tooth and nail. But I think that the evidence that was presented yesterday was overwhelming. I mean, it's overwhelming. So I don't think liberals are going to be able to carry on this routine of pretending like nothing's wrong. I mean, they're eventually they're going to hit up against it. Now, I think, what do you think about people like Sidney Powell filing lawsuits in some of these blue states? I mean, because I think we should look farther beyond just the election. At some point, I think they should file a case in California about this, because I think what you experienced with your mail-in ballot, you know, is that mail-in ballot probably arrived weeks beforehand, and it was just kept somewhere in storage, and they only went to them, you know, like at the last minute when they know how many they need of everything. You know,
that is true.
Yeah.
And I never, you know what? I never requested a mail-in ballots. We never requested a mail-in ballots. It was shoved into us. I mean, when I registered, I mean, I'm already registered Republican, but I never asked for a mail-in ballots. It came. I was going to vote at the precinct itself. I just received the ballot. So it says, you know, due to COVID, not COVID, due to COVID, you know, blah, blah, blah. So most of the precincts will be closed. You have to drive down to this. So we you know, we answered the ballot, we cast or mailed the ballots, and you know, I still have the ticket. That ticket is still here. When you go to the website, make sure to see if your ballots has been received. It's all fake. It's nothing. You just really lost confidence and trust in the system, and this is the problem. This is a problem. We got to do better than this.
Okay, well, and I know you got to get back to your family to eat dinner. I want to thank you so much for joining me, but I'm just going to ask one last question. How do you feel coming from the Philippines, which had this history of the contested elections? Because I remember the Cory Aquino, Ferdinand Marcos election. I mean, that one was globally famous. How does it feel to come from that to the United States and to see all this happening in the United States? How does that make you feel?
Well, I feel that I'm, you know, coming from the Philippines. I saw all the what happened in the Philippines was during the election was really a fraudulent election, and during the Marcos dictatorship. But we all trusted the U.S. As you know, I am so proud to be an American. Let me tell you that first. But knowing that happens here, and it's happening, and I just lost trust. I mean, we all from the Philippines trusted the U.S. because when during the Marcos and the Aquino or whoever he's running against during that time, there was a big fraudulent scenario that's going on. The counting was being rigged, but they even called some senators from the U.S. to observe. Do you remember that? They observed what's happening during the Philippines, and look at what's happening here. Aren't we all ashamed? I mean, Jesus Christ, give me a break. We should do better than this. I mean, I'm glad that Trump had brought it close to everything. I mean, you couldn't. I can call the guy a hero. I'm just telling you. He's a fighter, and I hope Sidney Powell doesn't give up. And We're gonna win this. We're gonna win this.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a good
Thank you, Bobby.
Thanksgiving. I really appreciate you giving me that information. All right.
Yeah, Bobby. I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure to hear that perspective. You know, often there's so many different perspectives that can help with our current fight over election integrity. The Philippines, to me, just suggests itself as a crucial example because the United States has this history with the Philippines. We colonized the Philippines for a certain number of years, and the pretext for that was always that the United States was going to bring freedom and democracy to the Philippines. And I'm hearing this from a lot of different Filipino American immigrants that they're really affected. I mean, they're very much depressed by the fact that that they came here to the United States, and the election integrity situation is in some ways worse. I mean, the scale of the fraud this year was huge, and the fact that so much of the media is really pretending as though there was no evidence of fraud when it's right in front of you. I think often people who live in situations where elections are just routinely defrauded, the people kind of get used to it, and they know that the elections are a joke. But it's a little bit harder for people in the United States who have had so much confidence in the election system to really swallow what has gone on. And I just I do want to talk about the 6 states and where they're at, and then I'll leave everyone to go back to your cranberry sauce and your pumpkin pie and everything. Currently, Pennsylvania and Arizona and Michigan are going to have hearings where they're going to present some of this evidence. So really, with all of those states, you can't write them off yet. Sidney Powell's lawsuits in Georgia and Michigan are separate from what Trump's legal team is doing, just so you understand. In Arizona and Michigan and in Pennsylvania, Trump's legal team is taking the lead on these hearings. So those electoral votes, because even if the judges and the governors in those states just completely blow this off, it can get appealed to the Supreme Court. So those 3, it's completely, you cannot rely on what the electoral vote means right now. There's so much that has to be adjudicated with that. In the case of Wisconsin and Georgia, they're still at the stage of doing recounts. And in Nevada, there is a judge that actually did authorize a hearing to hear of the evidence about election fraud in Nevada. So we have 6 states that are up in the air. Those electoral votes are basically, if they end up in Trump's hands, he could end up going over 270 quite easily. If they end up going in nobody's hands, as in those elections are nullified for all of those states, then neither candidate will have 270 electoral votes, and then it will go to the House of Representatives. I think that what I've written about this week a little bit is that this is a big turning point for all of America, but I think you also have to consider this is a huge turning point for the left, for the American Democratic Party, because right now they are placing themselves on the wrong side of history. We hear that term all the time, right? The wrong side of history. It is on the wrong side of history when you are in favor of covering up election fraud and you are against the enfranchisement of American citizens. I mean, the racial civil rights struggle, the struggle for women's rights, almost all of the fashionable social justice movements that have gone on in the past have hinged upon the right of enfranchisement and suffrage. The idea that those groups need to have the right to vote. It's a major right of citizenship. And that if you deny people that right, you are ultimately forcing them into a second-class status. You're taking away their rights as a citizen, and you are a citizen or that group of people. And so right now, the left is, in a certain sense, they're on the wrong side of history, because the people who are fighting against this election fraud are following in a very long and glorious tradition of fighting for universal citizen suffrage. That's what this is all about. You don't have suffrage if powerful groups in the state can basically rig the election, throw your vote away, or bury your vote under tons of fake votes, so that ultimately you don't have suffrage. You're disenfranchised. And I don't think that the left is going to flourish historically if this is what they're tied to. If they're yoked, like it's almost like having a ball and chain attached to your ankle for you to be stuck being on the side of saying, no, we're not going to investigate election fraud, and we're just going to force America to swallow, a lack of election integrity. It's a really bad place to be. But it's Thanksgiving, and we should be thankful that Sidney Powell and these folks are on top of it. And I'm really thankful that we're getting this information from the Philippines. I think the Philippines is definitely a key precedent to pay attention to. All right, so we'll do a show again soon.